The mermaid captured in a net by the side of the river cried out to Chika, tears dropping from her eyes. "Please help me or they will kill me and my baby." The mermaid pleaded in a soft, shaky voice. The Ose River was usually a place of peace for Chika. Its banks provided the thin reeds she used for weaving mats and the small, slippery fish she managed to snare for her teenage children's meager dinner. But today the air throbbed with a terrifying new sound. A soft, desperate, almost ethereal weeping. Chika crept through the dense riverine scrub, her worn wrapper catching on thorns. What she saw froze her heart. A creature was entangled near the shallow bank, trapped in a coarse fisherman's net. It was beautiful and horrific all at once. From the waist up, she had the torso of a woman, skin the color of polished mahogany, and hair like black seaweed streaked with shimmering silver. From the waist down, however, was a magnificent, iridescent tail, thrashing weakly against the mud. Mermaid. Chika's breath hitched. Her body became a battleground between paralyzing fear and a strange maternal pity. Stories of the river folks were common tales of seduction, drowning, and curses. She'd never believed them, not truly, until this moment. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee back to her small, leaky mud hut and pretend she had seen nothing. The mermaid lifted her head, her enormous, almond-shaped eyes, the color of the deep river water, swimming in tears. "Please." The voice was a whisper, a sound like water bubbling over stones. It was shaky and thin, filled with a panic that Chika knew intimately. "Help me, kind woman. Please, or they will kill me and my baby." Chika's fear, intense as it was, collided with the word baby. It was the same word that defined her life, her unending struggle. She thought of her two small children who were still asleep back home, and her heart softened. She was a poor woman, yes, broken by years of widowhood and endless toil, but she had never let an appeal for a child go unanswered. She took a shaky step closer. Who trapped you?" she managed, her voice barely a croak. The mermaid whimpered, her tail giving a weak flop. "The fishermen who set their illegal nets. They will be back at dawn. My time is close, and I cannot break free. Please, I beg you. If I do not reach the deep water soon, we both perish." "I cannot stay here long," Chika said, her gaze darting nervously towards the jungle path. "If anyone sees me, they will call me a witch." "Then we should act fast," the mermaid pleaded, urgency ringing clear in her voice. "Just cut the ropes. You are strong. You are a mother. You understand." The appeal struck deep. Ignoring the trembling in her hands, Chika knelt. She fumbled for the small, dull knife she always kept tucked in her wrapper for cutting reeds. The net was thick, woven from heavy jute and rope, designed to trap large fish. It took every ounce of her strength. She saw the mermaid wince in pain with every cut, a clear sign of the impending labor. Finally, with a loud snap, the last rope parted. The mermaid didn't hesitate. She shed the net like a discarded skin. She paused, her beautiful, desperate face turned to Chika. "You saved a life today, Chika, daughter of the riverbank," the mermaid had whispered. Chika watched the water swirl, a dizzying mix of panic and bewildered pride surging through her. She was about to turn and bolt when a low, painful moan pulled her attention back to the water's edge. She was floating, half submerged, clutching her swollen belly. Chika's relief vanished. "Why aren't you swimming away?" Chika demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. The fisherman might be nearby. The mermaid, whose name Chika did not know, struggled to lift herself onto the muddy bank. The magnificent tail now looked dull and slicked with mud and chillingly blood. I can't," the mermaid gasped, wincing. Her beautiful skin, where the net had been tight, was crisscrossed with raw, weeping bruises. The net was too strong. I think I've hurt myself and the current is too harsh now. I need shelter just for a little while until the pain passes." Chika's heart hammered against her ribs. Her earlier fear returned, now layered with a terrifying new responsibility. Hiding a mermaid. This was madness. It was an invitation for disaster, a clear path to being branded a witch and driven from the village. No, I can't." Chika shook her head rapidly. "You must go back to the water. I have children. If the fishermen find you near my home, they will burn it down." "Then they must not find me," the mermaid pleaded, her voice choked with tears. "The deep is my home, but the shallow bank is a death sentence right now. Please, I will die here. My baby will die here. You have saved us once. Do not abandon us to the mud now." The raw desperation in the creature's eyes broke Chika's resolve completely. She saw her own helplessness reflected there, the same utter vulnerability she felt when her children were sick and she had no medicine. "All right," Chika sighed, defeat heavy in her voice. "But we have to move now. We can't use the main path. There is a small ditch trail behind the mango thicket. We'll have to crawl most of the way." Moving the mermaid was an agonizing task. The creature was heavy, and the friction of her tail on the dry earth brought forth fresh cries of pain. "We must hurry," Chika urged, pulling and lifting, straining every muscle in her wiry body. "Lean on me. Try to keep your tail off the sharp stones." "I'm trying," the mermaid panted, resting her head briefly on Chika's shoulder. "Thank you. I wish I could repay your risk. Just promise me you'll leave before the sun is fully up," Chika mumbled, eyes constantly scanning the dark, humid forest. Every snapping twig sounded like a fisherman's footstep. "I have nothing to lose but my life, but I cannot lose my children." They crawled, dragged, and stumbled through the thicket. Chika's worn feet were scratched by thorns, and her wrapper was soaked with sweat, river water, and the mermaid's blood. Finally, the dim outline of Chika's humble, dilapidated mud house appeared through the sparse trees. It was a pathetic sight, a low roof, peeling mud walls, but to Chika, it felt like the safest place in the world. She pushed open the rickety wooden door with her foot. The room was dark, lit only by the faint light filtering through the door opening. A faint, welcome silence greeted her. "Thank the ancestors," Chika whispered, a wave of relief washing over her. She gently eased the mermaid onto the woven sleeping mat, right next to the small raised platform where her two children slept, blissfully unaware of the incredible danger that had just entered their home. The teenage children, a boy and a girl, were curled up together, peaceful shapes beneath a tattered blanket. The sight of them brought a small, painful smile to Chika's face. "They're sleeping," Chika said, keeping her voice low. "It's a miracle. I didn't want them to see you and be terrified." The mermaid looked at the kids, her deep eyes softening with a distant, weary tenderness. "They are beautiful. Thank you for this shelter, Chika. It is a debt I can never repay. Just rest." Chika insisted, moving to a clay pot to fetch water. And tell me what I can do for those bruises. We need to stop the bleeding. The mermaid took a ragged breath. I need the deep, not the surface. But for now, just a bowl of fresh water. And maybe a quiet prayer to the river. Chika nodded, fetching the water. She knew she had invited a storm into her life, but as she looked at the injured, pregnant creature and then at her own sleeping children, she knew she could not have made any other choice. The river had brought its pain to her doorstep, and she, a poor, struggling mother, had chosen to bear the burden. Chika placed the clay bowl of water beside the mermaid, whose skin, where it wasn't bruised, was beginning to look dry and faintly scaled. I need to get some herbs from the stream bank, Chika whispered, dipping a cloth in the water. But I can't leave you. I don't know when the fishermen come back to check their nets. The mermaid then introduced herself simply as Umi, then winced as Chika dabbed gently at a deep gash near her hip bone. They won't be far, Umi replied, her voice strained. They are greedy men. They know what my kind is worth to collectors in the cities. They won't just wait. They'll be searching. They won't search this deep into the bush, Chika muttered, trying to convince herself more than Umi. My hut is worthless. Why would they look here? Suddenly, a distant but distinct sound cut through the humid silence. A low, guttural male shout. It was far but too close for comfort. Umi's eyes, wide and terrified, locked onto Chika's. They are close, Chika. They know. They are searching the banks and the surrounding brush. The net wasn't broken, it was cut. They know someone helped me. Chika felt a knot of cold dread tighten in her stomach. She crept to the single small wooden window, peering out. The forest outside was still draped in shadows, but the air felt charged, expectant. I have to hide you better, Chika said urgently, her mind racing. The mat isn't enough. There's nowhere else, Umi said weakly. Chika looked around the tiny room. The only other large object was a heavy, old palmwood storage box where she kept her dried cassava and thread. It was large but too short for Umi's tail. The bed platform, Chika whispered, pointing to the low, raised wooden frame where her children slept. Underneath it. It's dusty, but it will hide you. Moving Umi again was a feat of raw desperation. Chika had to slide the kids gently to one side of the platform, praying they wouldn't stir. Then, with a frantic heave, she maneuvered Umi's tail first into the dark crawlspace beneath the platform. You must not make a sound, Chika hissed, her hands trembling. Not a breath. I'll cover the entrance with my woven mats. Umi nodded silently, tears streaming down her face from the pain and the sheer terror of being trapped. Chika swiftly rearranged the room, throwing her own threadbare sleeping mat over the opening. She then moved her mortar and pestle to an inconspicuous spot nearby. She sat on the floor, adopting a pose of exhaustion, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The shouts grew closer, accompanied by the sound of heavy boots crunching through dried leaves. A rough voice, loud and coarse, echoed right outside the hut. Olu! Check that ditch trail. If she crawled, that's where she went. Another voice, closer still, answered. She can't be far. That net was a beauty. She's worth a year's wages, dead or alive. Then, terrifyingly, a shadow fell across Chika's open doorway. A massive man, his face scarred and his eyes red with greed, stood silhouetted against the morning light. He carried a machete that gleamed faintly. Look at this, the man sneered, taking a step inside. He spotted Chika sitting on the floor. Just a lonely woman in a pile of mud. He towered over her. "Woman," he barked. "Have you seen anything strange near the river? Any large animal? Maybe something someone might have caught in a fishing net?" Chika forced her face to be blank, her voice frail. "Good morning, sir. No, I have seen nothing. I just woke up. I am too busy worrying about how to feed my children to watch the river." She gestured vaguely to the kids sleeping peacefully on the platform above Umi. The man's eyes darted around the tiny room, lingering on the storage box and the kids. He was about to take another step when a loud, insistent thump came from underneath the sleeping platform. Chika's blood ran cold. Umi was clearly struggling, perhaps in labor, or simply too terrified to control her movements. The fisherman's eyes narrowed instantly, focused on the area beneath the mat. "What was that?" he demanded, his hand gripping the machete hilt. "Did you hear that noise?" Chika's mind flashed, a desperate, frantic surge of maternal instinct overriding her terror. The fisherman's eyes were sharp, fixed on the floor mat covering Umi. "What was that?" the man demanded again, his hand gripping the machete hilt. "Did you hear that noise?" Chika let out a sudden, piercing wail that was part genuine distress and part theatrical performance. She slapped her hands against the dusty earth and began to rock back and forth. "Ah, my belly! My empty, empty belly!" she cried out, tears that weren't entirely fake springing to her eyes. The fisherman, whose name was Musa, took a confused half-step back. "What in the mud is wrong with you, woman?" "The hunger," Chika wailed, pointing a shaking finger at her two children sleeping on the platform. "I hear noises every morning, sir. My body is empty, my head is spinning. It's the sound of the hunger demon gnawing at me, at my poor house, at my poor children." She scrambled forward on her knees, grabbing the hem of Musa's rough tunic. "Sir, I beg you, you are a strong man, a rich fisherman. Can you spare a few coins? My baby boy, Kofi, hasn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days. The sounds you hear are the spirits of starvation coming to collect us." Musa scowled, clearly taken aback by the sudden dramatic shift from silence to loud, pathetic pleading. Greed was his primary instinct, not charity, and he didn't appreciate the interruption to his search. "Get off me, woman," he spat, roughly pulling his tunic free. "I don't have time for your village dramas. We're looking for something that can buy your whole pathetic village." He stomped out, yelling over his shoulder toward the bushes. "Olu! Forget the bank. Head for the old Irako tree. I suspect we check there." Chika remained perfectly still, listening until the heavy crunching of their boots faded completely into the distance. She stayed that way for a full minute, her body rigid with a tension so fierce it was painful. Finally, she slowly peeled back the mat. Umi was curled up tight, her face pale, slick with sweat, and utterly terrified. "They're gone," Chika breathed, reaching in to stroke Umi's hair. "For now." "Thank you," Umi whispered, her voice barely audible. Chika managed a weak, bitter smile. "Necessity is the greatest teacher, Umi. Now we have to deal with what they almost discovered. The baby is coming, isn't it?" Umi nodded, a wave of pain making her shut her eyes tight. "I cannot hold it much longer. The bruises. They stirred things up. I need deep water or I need clean ground. You cannot deliver a mermaid." The silence after the fisherman left was thick, heavy, and fragile. Chika was crouched by the platform, carefully checking the kids. Kofi and Amara were beginning to stir, roused not by the noise of the men but by the slow, creeping light of the full morning sun filtering into the room. "I cannot move," Umi whispered from beneath the bed. Her voice was weak, laced with a fresh wave of agony. "The child is pushing. I need water, Chika. Deep water. It is the only thing that can ease this pain and give me the strength to welcome the baby." Chika knew Umi was right. The dry earth was draining her. She had to risk the river again. Just then Kofi, Chika's 14-year-old son, sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He looked down, saw the large sleeping mat askew, and noticed the shimmering scales and faint blood on the dust near the platform's edge. His eyes widened into dark, startled circles. He nudged his younger sister, Amara. "Look," he whispered, pointing a shaky finger. Amara, a quick and observant 12-year-old, squinted. Chika's heart stopped. She saw the moment the children understood that something was wrong. Something utterly unnatural was hidden in their small room. Chika lunged forward, placing a hand gently over each child's mouth. "Shoo!" she hissed, her eyes pleading with them. "Do not make a sound, my loves. There is a hurt lady here. A very special, very hurt lady who needs our help." She slowly removed her hand, trusting their instinct to obey. Kofi's voice was a terrified squeak. "Mama, is that a fish? A giant fish under the bed?" "No, Kofi. It's a person," Chika explained quickly, keeping her voice low and steady. "Her name is Umi. Bad men hurt her and her unborn baby. We are the only ones who can save them." Amara, less afraid and more curious, scooted to the edge of the platform and peered down. She gasped, not in fear but in awe. Umi's magnificent, though scraped, tail was visible in the gloom. Umi, sensing the children's presence, spoke with a soft, strained effort. "Hello, little ones. I'm sorry to scare you. I need the river very, very much. Can you help your strong mother get me home?" The sound of Umi's beautiful, watery voice captivated them. Kofi's fear was instantly replaced by the thrill of a secret mission. "The bad men were here, Mama," Kofi said, his voice now hushed and serious. "I heard them. They shouted about the Irako tree." "I know, my son. We must be quick. We have to take Umi to the river now, before the bad men realize I lied." Chika pulled a large, damp, woven Kent cloth from her meager chest, her most prized possession. She spread it on the floor next to the bed. "Kofi, Amara, listen carefully. This is a game of silence. We are going to slide Umi onto this cloth. Then we are going to carry her on the cloth like a hammock, not to the usual river path, but through the old path to the mangrove swamp." The mangrove swamp path was rarely used. It was tangled, muddy, and thick with insects, but it provided perfect cover and led to a deep, secluded inlet of the Ose River. "The mangroves?" Amara asked, wrinkling her nose. "It's very sticky, Mama." "It is sticky, but it is safe. The fisherman won't look there," Chika confirmed. "Kofi, you take the front corner. Amara, you take the side. I will take the rest of the weight. We must move slowly, silently, and pray the Kent holds." Working quickly and with surprising focus, the family prepared. Chika slid Umi onto the Kent cloth. Umi gasped, her face pale, the delivery pain intensifying with the movement. "I'm sorry, Umi," Chika murmured, her brow furrowed with effort. "Just a little longer." As soon as you hit that water, your magic will come back. You will be safe. Umi nodded, gripping the rough fabric. Hurry, Chika. I feel the tide of life pulling at me. I need the water's strength. Together, the poor widow and her 2 small children took hold of the heavy cloth, lifting the injured mermaid. The 3 small figures, heads bowed in concentration, began their perilous, slow journey toward the swamp, carrying the weight of a secret and a life on the beautiful muddy cloth. They moved like shadows, leaving the relative safety of their hut for the tangled, dangerous protection of the wild riverbank. The old path to the mangrove swamp was a nightmare. It wasn't just unused. It was actively reclaiming itself. The air, already thick with morning humidity, was heavy with the stench of stagnant water and decaying leaves. The Kent cloth, meant for festivals and celebrations, dragged heavily on the damp, uneven ground, already soiled with mud and blood. Roots! Roots everywhere! Kofi gasped, his hands straining to keep the cloth from snagging. The exposed, serpentine roots of the mangroves laced the ground, tripping hazards that threatened to dump the precious cargo. Chika's face was slick with sweat, her muscles burning from the effort. Step over them, Kofi. Don't let go. Amara, keep the cloth high on your side. Amara, surprisingly determined, held tight, but her small feet kept sinking into the soft, clinging mud. Mama, my feet are stuck. It's pulling my sandals off. Leave the sandals. Chika instructed, her voice sharp with desperation. They couldn't afford to stop. Every minute they spent struggling was a minute closer to the fisherman realizing the deception and returning. Umi, lying on the cloth, was growing weaker. Her beautiful bruised face was contorted in pain, and she could no longer suppress the low, involuntary sounds escaping her lips. I can't hold it, Umi whispered, a faint tremor running through her body. The baby. It's close. If I stay on this dry ground, it will be stillborn. No, you won't. Chika pleaded, glancing frantically at the dense wall of the swamp ahead. We are almost there. We just need to reach the water that doesn't move. The path narrowed abruptly, forcing them to squeeze between 2 towering mangrove trees. The low-hanging, spiky branches raked against Umi's back, eliciting a sharp cry of pain. Chika! Umi cried out, a powerful tremor shaking the cloth. The river. I feel the urge. I cannot wait for the deep. Just get me to the mud and the waterline. Chika looked up. She could see the dark, glassy sheen of the tidal inlet barely 50 feet away. But the last stretch was the worst, a treacherous slope of slick, wet clay. We have to slide her. Chika shouted to the children. Kofi, let go of the front. Amara, let go. They were already close, and all Chika had to do was to carry Umi into the river. As the water washed over her, Umi let out a long, shuddering gasp. It was as if a charge of life had been run through her. The dullness left her skin, and the faint iridescent sheen returned to her scales. The mud is too shallow here, Umi whispered, her eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. I need to get to the center. To the deep eddy. Chika knew the center of the river was over her head. She looked at her small children, their faces streaked with mud and exhaustion. She had to take the final risk herself. Kofi, Amara, stand here. Do not move. Do not make a sound. I am going to move the lady to the deep. Chika plunged into the cold, thick mud and water, pushing her shoulder under Umi's torso. Hold your breath, Umi. With one last massive surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, Chika gave a mighty push, propelling Umi's heavier lower body out into the deeper center of the river. Umi cried out as she finally felt the buoyancy of the deep water envelope her. Her bruised tail gave a sudden, powerful, instinctive kick. She submerged instantly, disappearing beneath the dark surface. Chika staggered back toward her children, mud coating her from head to foot. They stood on the bank, chests heaving, waiting. Minutes stretched into an agonizing silence, broken only by the chirping of insects. The deep eddy was silent. Then, from the exact center of the river, a strange, beautiful light began to bloom just beneath the surface, a radiant, watery blue. The light pulsed, and then a sound unlike any other. A soft, beautiful, and utterly strong newborn cry, muffled slightly by the water, yet unmistakable. Chika sank to her knees, tears of exhaustion and triumph washing clean streaks down her muddy cheeks. Kofi and Amara stared, mesmerized, fear replaced by wonder. A few moments later, Umi surfaced silently. She was healed. The bruises were gone, her skin was flawless, and her silver-streaked hair flowed around her like a living current. Cradled in her arms was a tiny, perfect mermaid baby, its skin glowing with the same blue light. Umi looked at Chika, her expression one of profound gratitude. "You gave us the river's blessing, Chika. Now go. Go before they return. The river protects its own." Chika, Kofi, and Amara scrambled back up the slick clay slope of the mangrove path, their bodies exhausted but their hearts buoyed by the sound of the newborn cry. They were caked in mud, but the exhaustion was a welcome relief from the terror. They moved with a stealth they hadn't known they possessed, driven by the knowledge that the fisherman could return at any moment. They reached their little mud hut just as the sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows. It was deserted. Chika checked the surrounding bush, noting that the fisherman's heavy tracks had indeed led away toward the iroko tree, just as she'd hoped. "We clean up now," Chika whispered, her voice husky. "We wash the mud off the cloth, off our bodies. We forget we left this house. We are tired. We were hungry. That is all anyone needs to know." Kofi and Amara, seasoned now by their desperate adventure, nodded. They scrubbed the beautiful Kent cloth until the river mud and the faint traces of Umi's blood were gone, then spread it in the sun to dry. They ate the last of their meager cassava soup, and Chika, despite the trauma of the morning, forced herself to weave mats, singing a monotonous song to drown out the lingering fear. Days passed, slipping into the familiar routine of relentless poverty. Chika heard the fishermen's rough voices once more as they returned to the riverbank, cursing the false lead near the iroko tree and complaining about the loss of their valuable catch. But they never came back to Chika's poor, insignificant hut. They never suspected that the frail, starving woman was the one who had cheated them. Chika and her children carried the immense secret in the quiet sanctuary of their hearts, relieved that the danger had passed. 7 days after, the night was moonless and still. Chika had finally fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep on her mat. Suddenly, a sharp, clear knock echoed from the wooden door. 3 insistent raps. Chika jolted awake. She sat up, her heart immediately pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Who would knock at this hour? The fisherman. Fear coiled in her stomach. She slipped quietly off her mat, careful not to wake the kids. She crept to the door and listened. Silence. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she slowly pulled back the heavy wooden latch and eased the door open just a crack. The dark air was empty. No one was there. But lying directly on her worn doorstep, shining brilliantly under the light of a single unseen powerful source, were 3 small, intricately carved wooden boxes. They glowed with an internal light, a soft, warm gold that seemed to pulse gently in the dark. Chika stared. The boxes were slick with dew and carried the unmistakable, fresh scent of deep river water. "The river remembers its friends," Umi had said. Shaking, Chika knelt and quickly gathered the boxes into her arms, the cool weight of the wood surprising her. She slipped back inside and bolted the door, her breathing ragged. She set the boxes in a far corner of the hut, covering them with an old blanket. She didn't open them that night. The mystery was too great, the fear too close. She fell back asleep with a hand resting near the hidden treasure, protecting it. Chika kept the boxes hidden for 3 days, wrestling with fear and curiosity. Was it a trick? Curse? Finally, she felt the urge to take a look at what was in the box. She waited until her children were out gathering firewood, and with trembling hands, she lifted the blanket. She opened the largest box first. A gasp escaped her lips, quickly stifled. The box was packed to the brim with glistening, uncut gold nuggets and shimmering silver coins. The second box held ropes of vibrant, polished coral beads and carved ivory figurines. The third, smallest box contained a collection of perfectly formed luminous pearls, each one pulsing with a pale, watery blue light she had seen in the mangrove river. The sheer volume of wealth was overwhelming. This was not a small gift. This was a king's ransom, the price of the life she had saved. Chika moved swiftly and secretly. She traveled in the deep night to the nearest city, selling only a small, manageable portion of the gold. It was enough. It was more than enough. Within weeks, the poor widow and her children moved out of the mud hut. Chika purchased the largest, most beautiful house in the village, a sturdy, sprawling compound with a tiled roof and a stone courtyard. She bought her children fine, colorful clothes that shone in the sun, and their plates were always full of healthy food. The lines of worry that had carved deep into Chika's face softened, replaced by a quiet confidence. Whenever a curious villager, stunned by her sudden transformation, asked how she acquired her fortune, Chika would simply smile, a serene, knowing look in her eye. "I was once very poor, and I helped a friend in great need," she would say. "The river always pays its debts, and some friends always pay very well." And that is how Chika, the poor, struggling widow who chose kindness over fear, became the wealthiest, most respected woman in the village, proving that the most desperate risks often yield the deepest rewards.